Welcome to Season 2 of Keeping It 100, Real Conversations with Jacqui, where each week we will discuss life experiences with subject matter experts. Stay tuned for this next episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Keeping It 100, Real Conversations with Jacqui. And I'm your host, Jacqui Mono, and I have my good friend Lisa Radz that's going to be joining us today, and she's an expert on trauma-informed coaching/training, and we're going to have a little bit more of a conversation about that. I'm sure most of us don't know about it, and we're so excited to have her on the show. Lisa, how are you doing, my dear? I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself here.
I am doing really well. Thank you, Jacqui. So my name is Lisa and my pronouns are she, her. And I am a trauma-informed strength coach based out of the city of Calgary. I'm also a personal fitness coach and a yoga teacher and a social worker, as well as finishing my degree in the area of social work. My whole mission here is to just create a safe gym space and have a sense of inclusion. And I feel like that is really imperative with trauma-informed care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I'm just for anyone that's listening to the show or watching the show right now, how would you explain in layman's terms, how would you explain trauma-informed coaching or training? Like, how would you explain that in layman's terms? If somebody was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, how would you explain it to somebody who has no clue?
So I'm just going to go back into like why I got into it. Mm-hmm. And then my tie into it. So my work does come out of my own experience with like not being able to access my body and like really feel the sensations within my body due to trauma. And I never really enjoyed working out. And then eventually I met CrossFit and I fell like in love with Olympic lifting and strength training. And I used this methodology to find how finding my own treatment to heal my own trauma. And so I'm wanting to pass that torch on to other clients who might have trouble tapping into their own movement methodologies to help access their nervous systems and then dealing with that in an appropriate way to help them come back into their bodies. So in layman's terms, really trauma disassociates or numbs us away from our body and we become disconnected. And so with this type of form of training, it brings you back into your body and creates agency and resiliency. So you can take this not just inside the gym setting, but into the world at large.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and both of us are both trainers. We understand how, sometimes when you come from a sedentary place to now starting to move your body, you have to almost build that habit. So, I mean, we always say it takes about 21 days to build a habit to get into the routine of things. But we know in reality, sometimes 21 days is not even quite enough because there's just so many mental barriers that you have to kind of break down. So is this something that you kind of work through in that manner? Is that how you would approach it?
Totally. I mean, sustaining like any movement practice means we need to make space for change, right? And change can be very scary. And so with working with my clients, I do assess them supporting this change process. So I'm sure we're all aware as coaches and trainers about the stages of change, the stages of change model.
Exactly.
So my work is trying to move my client in pre-contemplation to contemplation. So they're in stage 2 to a more of like, I want my clients to have action and maintenance at the end of our work together. And so they have now fully integrated a new practice, a new change with physical activity, and it brings them joy. It's not like a forced thing,
And I mean, when we're talking about like, the maintenance, action and maintenance stage, we all know that everyone is different, right? Like some people, it takes them maybe about 3 to 4 months to really get into that routine of things and that really, really fire it off. Some people 8 months plus, right? Where they constantly need that extra push. So when somebody is still, let's say they've been working out maybe for a couple of years, they have a trainer, and the only reason why they're still keeping up with it is because that trainer is on them for that accountability piece and knowing that they're paying for it. So like, how do you get a client from that 8 month plus where they're still kind of struggling? So what would be the step process behind that for you when you're dealing with a client like that?
So I would like to ask them to get curious about their strengths. So helping clients get unstuck, and really recognize that we do heal not in isolation, and we
Mm-hmm.
heal together. And so really building relationships such as working with a coach can actually is speed up the healing process.
Mm-hmm.
Setting SMART goals is very important with my clients. So specific, measurable, attainable, relative, and
Mm-hmm.
time-based. Like we tend to overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do now. And so I
Right.
like to just, especially with those who have suffered, not included, not minority groups even. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
not, I'm also like trying to broaden my scope of not just those who may have suffered traumas, but like, minority groups, LGBTQ, who identify in those communities, having a creative, a safe, creative, and expansive space to work out is very important. But like
Absolutely.
listing those SMART goals is definitely a key. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. No, yeah, I mean, SMART goals is probably something anyone should be taking, should be probably following those steps anyway, in order to keep on track with your goals. So now when we're talking specifically with, people that have the form of trauma of, let's say, food disorder, or even just like body image disorder, where even after you get to a certain stage in your fitness and you feel good and you're like, oh, I look good, but mentally you're still stuck maybe in that 100-pound plus body. How do you, is that something that you work with your clients on? Like, is that something that you guys would break it down, and how would you approach that? Just trying to learn a little bit more. I know.
Yeah.
I know. I
I love
have so many questions. Yeah.
I love it. So like it's very definitely, it's like my work is very relative to everybody.
Hmm.
Same with like working with the nervous system. Our level of safety is very relative. So those individuals who have come with a huge disconnect from their body, and now they're fully integrated and connected to their body, but they may have those, like the stages of change, there's that relapse period, right? We do
Right.
relapse. And so they
Hmm.
may come back into that place of who they were naturally, but it's having that awareness and that resiliency that we've built up to that point to actually get them back out. But like it does come from like a more of building more resources and having more tools in our toolkit, and it can be mental or physical toolkit, will
Hmm.
actually help us get out of those lapses faster. And it
Right.
actually gets, when we get out of those lapses faster, when we're in a more socially engaged state. So that would be working with that nervous system response that I work with my clients on. So
Hmm.
like I talk about how trauma can affect you while strength training. So are you aware of like some of the nervous system states?
Well, I'm familiar with them just from my training background, but
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I can't name them from the top of my
Cool.
head.
I'm
So teach me. Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
So like some of the clients I see who have, struggled with like maybe disordered eating in the past,
Mm.
body dysmorphia. There's, addictions. I have a array of domestic violence, for instance. I have a array of clients that come see me from all these backgrounds. And actually, I kind of want to just touch on the subject of what a session might look like, and then moving
Yeah,
on from there, because like that would,
absolutely.
yeah. So usually my sessions are about an hour to an hour and a half, and we do a
Hmm.
30-minute talk session. And this is just to kind of get a broader scope of what you're needing. So we do a full assessment. Then we can talk about what's kind of been keeping you stuck and the blocks of like building that healthy lifestyle for change. And then
Hmm.
we go into the physical movement. I do a full movement assessment on you, and then we crush a sweaty workout and you feel freaking
Hmm.
great. But I also include meditation in my training. I include mindfulness, and I use a lot of orientation techniques. So
Hmm.
that's part of somatic experiencing, is just orientating to feel safe in where we are. Just to sort of feel that socially engaged state. I want to have in terms of nervous system work, it's called co-regulation, and that's one of the foundation principles of the theory that I'm working with. It's
Right.
called polyvagal theory. So we need to feel co-regulated together to really help and heal our nervous system responses to stress. So
Hmm.
some of the effects that they can have, we can have very a hyper aroused state, or a hypo-aroused state. And I'm trying to bring my clients who come see me back into a window of tolerance. So usually when trauma can affect you when you're going to the gym is you have a reduced capacity for working out. You know, you might feel way more fatigued than usual. There's hypervigilance in the gym, like you're constantly like feeling on edge. You know, there can be exacerbated symptoms of flashbacks, emotional flashbacks. Injury can lead to injury and reduced ability to recover in between working out and resting. So having someone who is trauma informed working with you with a background, acknowledging where you're at and meeting you specifically where you're at can be crucial, because working with, I've noticed if you go into any fitness center, if you work with a coach who isn't trauma informed, it can be very demoralizing for that person who has previously found enjoyment in movement. And
I agree. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's sort of where I could take this.
Yeah. And also because it's very, very psychological. I don't know. I think for me, it being in a place where once upon a time I was not active. I haven't always been in fitness. I wasn't always athletic, right? So coming from that place where during the journey from where I was then to where I am now, I know for a fact that I'm probably a totally different person than what I was. But there's a lot of psychological work that we have to, work on ourselves psychologically, whether it be with, someone like yourself or even like a therapist, a psychologist or whatever the case may be. There's so many different therapists out there, social workers, psychologists, all sorts of therapists out there. So I know that it takes a lot of work. Even for myself, sometimes being 132 pounds now, sometimes I can't help but when I wake up in the morning and I look at myself and I'm, I know it's all in my head. I trust me, I know it, but sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I don't feel like I like what I see. And we all know that, that's something that's work that I have to constantly work on myself. And that's why we need people like you, right? So it's a very, very long process. And for me, I always feel like this is where people need to be a little bit kinder to themselves, and coaches need to train themselves and also educate themselves in terms of where every individual is coming from, because everyone is coming from a different place. Everyone's journey will be different as well. So absolutely agree. Sorry, I went on a tangent there, girl.
No, I love it.
Yeah, I'm very passionate when it comes to like in terms of like the coaching style where you almost need to be empathetic. So I totally get that, right? Like, yeah, is it empathetic? Sure. I don't know. What would you call it?
No, empathy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that's that co-regulation piece, right?
Right.
That's that one where we're actually matching our nervous systems and we feel socially engaged in the world. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. This is great. So, so when we're talking about, so now you've walked them through the 30-minute orientation piece, talking a little bit more. Now, the style of training, how would you break it down for a client that's totally new to training and, they're still not confident on the ability for them to, whatever, how do you go about that, the movement part of it? How would you break that down?
Love it. Yes. I know. And I do see athletes too. So there are people who are on the opposite spectrum who know movement very well, but some of their muscles are just completely shut down and they're like, why isn't my glute firing? And I'm like, well, let's take a look at that. Let's but with those individuals who are wanting to start out with this brand new off the bat, obviously we wouldn't do like a CrossFit style WOD right off the bat either with them. But more, I talk about them through, so like then I would integrate more breath. So we would bring the breath in, we'd work with how to breathe through exercise, because that is so key.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what the funny thing is, Lisa, is that strength training breathing is so different from group fitness or HIIT like style training. And it's so funny that, everyone may assume that every coach knows that piece of it, but that's just so different. So let's talk about breath. Yes. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
talk about breath. Yeah.
So what do you want? What would you like to know about breath?
Well, I mean, let's just talk about like that control piece of it. When you're strength training, you're obviously dealing with, either building on that heavier weight, lower reps, longer rest time. And a lot of the times, if you're coming from a different place where maybe you're used to doing, aerobic style classes where your heart rate stays up and it stays up for a while, and you're consistent with your cardiovascular endurance. But with strength training, yes, there's cardiovascular involved, but it's a different way of training because you need to learn how to engage the core, right? So I just want to kind of talk about, I wanted you to kind of explain the steps in which, how would you coach someone who has that mental thought of saying, okay, but I can crush like, an hour of like, I don't know, a muscle and conditioning class. I'm just throwing a class out there, like a total body conditioning class where they're just using 10 pounds, 12 pounds to some, and then they come into a scenario where now all of a sudden you have 100 pounds on your back to squat it. How would you break that down? For people that are like, so, because I know that sometimes I push myself a little too hard and I'm not patient with myself, so I'm aware of that that mentality behind it, where when I'm strength training, it's like I'm expecting when somebody says, okay, I have like 120 pounds to do whatever, and then all of a sudden I can't do it, and then I'm hard on myself. Does it make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So how would you break that down as a coach?
Okay, so right off the bat, I mean, I wouldn't have them squatting 100 pounds right off the bat, right? It's slow progression, progressive overload, right? I would make them go totally slow, build their nervous system response up. But we need to accumulate breath response in heavy lifting because yes, breath is related to core strength. Like when lifters have those belts, super crucial because that helps contract the core. So, breath down, holding, and then exhaling as you come up, right? But that's like standard protocol. But with someone who has dealt with, a lot of trauma or disassociation, tapping into their breath is very important because the breath is the gateway to presence. And when we've experienced trauma, right, we're not in the moment. We are now checked out. And especially we need to be present when we're holding 100 pounds of weight on our back. And so using the breath, we have to activate the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the key. I usually call it like, we have fast speed internet from like here to here. And then our dorsal vagal, like our one that we need to actually activate when we tend to be immobilized or not using our breath, like we're chest breathers, right? That's like dial up. It's like we don't freaking connect all the way down. So like that vagus nerve, right? It comes from our head all the way down to our gut, and our gut and our diaphragm is like so important to how we feel, how we move, how we breathe. And look, I'm not perfect. I know I can chest breathe when I'm anxious and when I do heavy lifting, when I'm doing a WOD, like, oh my God, but I have to cue myself. So one thing I do is I do tapping, sinus tapping. So I like that. Between sets, I get my clients, if they're starting to have any like anxiety or their breath is not in sync with their nervous system, tapping their thymus gland, like this sound really brings you back to being present. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It actually has a very soothing. Okay, so for people who are listening to the audio, we're actually like just like tapping our chest right now. Of course, you can always, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. But yeah, no, this is great. Like it actually has a very there's a sense of calmness with it.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's very soothing. Okay, Lisa. Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm gonna try that actually. Cool. Yeah. Okay, so those are the steps that you would walk through with a client and have them tap that chest. And what's the next one that you would do after that?
So I would maintain their rhythmic breathing through the session. And I would also focus on isometric contractions with individuals who are just starting out a workout program with me. So I would love to see what muscles are underactive or just completely shut off online. Like that is that's what I know, like when people can be disassociated from that part of the body. Some
Right.
people, they just need a poke. They need just a proprioceptive poke, and they can
Mm-hmm.
actually feel like, oh shit, my glutes totally not firing, now it is. So I like
Mm-hmm.
to do I timed them. There's about 4 exercises, and if you're watching on YouTube and listening to audio, like definitely try this at home.
Yeah.
But there's a split squat isometric hold. You do it for 30 seconds to a minute, and then you can time yourself and just see how long you last without fatiguing. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's a glute bridge isometric hold. There's a push-up isometric hold, and then there's a
Mm-hmm.
line Y raise isometric hold, just to see how your shoulder mobility is doing, and what areas are offline in your shoulders. And like a lot of my clients,
Mm-hmm.
they're desk workers. They
Yeah.
are those with those rounded
Around the
shoulders,
backs. Yeah. Yeah.
totally. So
Mm-hmm.
even doing these simple 4 exercises are not very simple for individuals. And and it does take a slow progression to get those muscles back online. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about the isometric holds though. So
Yeah.
as we know, isometric holds are not always for everyone, just depending on that medical condition, especially with heart disease or some form of cardiac events. So how would you work with someone who has been through some sort of cardiac trauma, and isometric exercises are probably not the best way to go just because of the high blood pressure issues or whatever, right? So how would you kind of maneuver that scenario?
So for those individuals, I mean, through the assessment, obviously, I would assess what they are needing.
Hmm.
I would go through what so I use then I would tackle their breath. Like we would go into more mobilization
Mm.
responses. So
Yeah.
I use this it's like a half deflated Pilates ball, and
Mm.
it's like MFR. So like we'll like use so to mobilize the belly and the diaphragm, which can
Yeah.
really help our cardiac output and our response to how to breathe properly through higher intensity trainings,
I
right?
like that.
So
Yep.
yeah, we would more just work on how to like open up your diaphragm and your lungs and your capacity for breath. So we would lie on that ball. Like I'm doing a workshop here in the city, like this weekend on that. Like that's something that I teach in my yoga classes, is just belly abdominal breathing is so key. Like when
Mm-hmm.
we are experiencing or have a chronic condition or chronic pain or inflammation in the system, it's usually because we're bracing or there's some sort of like tightening in the body. And so I like to know like where that is. And usually it's held in the belly and the diaphragm. And if not, it could be in the back, the upper thoracic, or your lower back. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we just target those tissues, and we do a more slower, obvious, like way more slower base
Yeah.
class. Yeah, for
I
sure.
like that.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, this is really, really informative. I love, 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 love it. So, okay, so like, okay, so we've covered that part, and so where can people find you? Because I mean, you have a lot to offer. Obviously, you're incredible. I've known you for a few years now. I met Lisa through Fit House through CrossFit, and a few years ago. So I think you're an amazing, amazing trainer. So how can people find you or reach you? And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, they can find me at my Instagram at Lisa Radz to find out way
Mm-hmm.
more info. My link to my website is also on there.
Perfect.
Yeah, just DM me, give me a shout. You can also find me on Facebook, Lisa Radz.
Fabulous.
But yeah, I also do in person. I do online. So I can work with anyone anywhere. But I
Perfect.
do in person sessions at Passage Studios, and you can also check them out on the website and book into. But yeah, it's pretty
Excellent.
neat work and much needed in today's society for inclusion. Yeah.
We also just work in such a noisy world
Mm,
these days. There's so much going on that it's so important for us to reconnect and just, be in tune with, be present in what we're doing, right? I'll
totally.
leave all that information on the show notes as well, you guys, just in case you missed it listening to this. And basically, the takeaway is just to be in tune with your body and just reach out to Lisa if you have any more questions on trauma informed coaching. Is there anything else, Lisa, you want to add in before we close off, my dear?
No, that is it. Thank you so
I
much,
think
Jacqui.
so.
Thank you. It's
You're
been a
very,
pleasure.
very welcome. You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time for joining us. Thanks everyone for listening to this awesome piece of the show. Love it. Please let us know if you guys have any questions. Leave us some reviews, and we'll catch you guys on that next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Please do not forget to leave us an awesome review, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and keep your notifications on for the next episodes ahead. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, please do not hesitate to contact us at Jacqui@rhythmfitness.ca.